One of the most fascinating religious scenarios in the world will begin to play out this week in Italy as Catholic cardinals gather to vote on electing a new pontiff to replace Pope Francis, who passed away last month. Joining us to talk about the highly secretive process, Héctor Acero Ferrer, a religious scholar from the Institute for Christian Studies. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about the entire process and what's going to be happening from here on in when it comes to timeline, Héctor.
Okay, so tomorrow, 3:30 our time, we will have the cardinals have a mass, go into the Sistine Chapel and begin their process. The process is secret. We know some things about it because of information we get from previous conclaves, but it's basically rounds of votes. So they vote, they read the votes aloud, they retreat, they vote again until they reach a majority, 2/3 of the cardinal group deciding over who will be the next pope.
What are some of the things being considered when choosing the next pontiff?
Several things. One of them is the role of the church in today's world. We live in a secularized sin world in which people consider their faith or their religion to be just one part of many other aspects of life. So how important that is for people is one of the things that cardinals are usually concerned about. Also, the church in places where there is catastrophe, either where there is war, where there is climate disaster, all of that. So those cardinals come in with that information in mind when they vote. But also our polarizing world, the fact that there are more traditional cardinals, there are more progressive cardinals encountering each other in that setting and trying to decide whether the church needs to oppose the progress of modernity or embrace it and kind of go with it.
What about geography? You know, Pope Francis, and we saw, from South America. Is that taken into consideration, certain parts of the world that needs to be a representative from a certain part of the world?
Yeah. One of the things we need to know this time around is that Pope Francis appointed 80% of the College of Cardinals. 80% of the people voting are Pope Francis people, but they are not Pope Francis people because they aligned with him politically or theologically. They are Pope Francis people because he wanted a more global church. So many appointees from Africa, from Asia, from Southeast Asia, from Latin America, which means that the center of gravity of the conclave will move south, and that will shift the politics of the moment.
When Pope Francis was chosen, I believe it was a 2-day process, the conclave. What is anticipated this time around?
2 to 3, that's what we have in kind of living memory. Most conclaves have been quite quick in comparison to the Middle Ages, where they used to last 30, 40 days, and it was a very painful process. I think we're going to see that 2-3 days allow for a few rounds of voting and then the choosing of a majority. So just like we will do in politics in the world, people vote, they have kind of a time to reflect. In many places of the world, there is a second round of voting, originally Colombian. In Colombia, that happens, and then people gather again and vote. They just do that under a time constraint. So okay. I'm going to say 2 to 3 days. Assuming
there are, and I say this, favorites going into this process and those who could be really highly considered. Is that the case right now, that there are a handful of individuals that seem to be considered as favorites? There are because they've been either charismatic figures in their own contexts, or because they've advocated for a particular cause, or because they are central to the structure of the Vatican, which is its own organization. So we have some Italians who are more familiar with the Vatican. We have a Filipino cardinal in the run who has been a very charismatic figure and known by the church beyond the Philippines or Asia. And we have a couple of other European, North American that might squeeze in there. But it's a secret process. We don't know what is going to happen in there. Sometimes they say whoever comes in as a pope goes out as a cardinal. Before we let you go, let's talk about the significance of the white smoke, because that will be the signal that new Pope has been chosen. What does that mean? Why do we see that all the time, and what is the symbolism?
So every time the votes are casted and counted, and then they are burned in an urn, and then the smoke of that is visible to the outside world. Something is added to that. It's a chemical now that is added so that the smoke is black when a decision has not been reached. That is not done when the decision has been reached. So at that point, we'll see white smoke, and that means the decision was made.
Okay, well, there is definitely a lot to consider. Appreciate you taking the time with us. Héctor Acero Ferrer, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.